Keeping an eye on my watch. So I close the rooms at the right time for people. All right. All right, people are starting to come back from breakout rooms. Excellent. Thanks so much, Kate. We're going to give it another couple of seconds as people join us from the breakout rooms. I see a lot of people coming back, which is fantastic. I hope that was a good opportunity to get to know a couple of people in this workshop a little bit better as we are in day one of the Peerpocalypse Conference. All right, it looks like we have got everybody back. So exciting. Marianne, do you want to take it away from here? And let me make sure Marianne is one of those folks who made it back from the breakout rooms.
I did make it back from the breakout room.
And I'm so glad to hear it.
I was on mute and I was talking. So anyway, yeah, we want to acknowledge and thank our committees. We had an amazing evaluation and advisory committee, an amazing steering committee, and we couldn't have done it without their help and their feedback every step of the way. And so we just want to thank all the people that participated in the surveys, the interviews, and the discussions. This is a picture of our summit at Temasclet Cultural Center in Pendleton, Oregon. We had 61 or 2 peers come for this summit, and we did our discussion, a couple of our discussion groups there. And we ate Indian tacos. Same, they were good.
All right, thank you, Marianne. I want to briefly go over the overall aims of this project, which were to describe the barriers, challenges, and successes of the peer-delivered services workforce and those who employ us across Oregon. We also wanted to better understand how to support the workforce and its employers, as well as being able to recognize any gaps in those current support strategies. Finally, we were hoping to identify sustainability strategies for peer-delivered services, including ways in which reimbursement may be improved. So we have got not too much time together, and we've got so much information, so many findings and recommendations to share with all of you today. And we're going to start by focusing specifically on the discussion groups and online surveys. And then Erin and Kate are going to take us into the interviews and some takeaways, recommendations, and dialogue around that. So Marianne and I are starting off here.
All right, thank you. Okay. So we were just want you to know how we collected this data and what methods we used. So our discussion groups, like I was saying, we had a few of those. There was some polling and some open discussion where we just brainstormed what it was in our area that we needed, wanted, or would like to see changed. So we had 152 peers and peer employers that were involved in this. And then we had 4 discussion groups, our workforce and peer employer online surveys, 401 members of the peer workforce, and then 49 employers, Right. And what was really amazing about this is we managed to hit 100% of all the counties for input on this survey. So we're really blessed to really reach out to the ones at the furthest reaches and not just the metro area. And so in total, we had 630 people took our survey. That was pretty amazing.
All right, thank you, Marianne. So we're going to go through some of the key takeaways in a couple key areas from the findings through the discussion groups and the online surveys. So something that we discovered is that when it comes to training and certification, there are currently only 8 counties in Oregon that offer state-approved peer certification training programs. And a majority of those are specific to addiction peer certification. So around 3/4 of those are specific to those who are pursuing an addiction peer certification. And it may not be a surprise related to that peers outside of the Portland metro area told us that there was a lack of training availability, and that was really a challenge to joining the workforce. And everybody, regardless of area, mentioned that training costs can be a barrier to access as well. People also highlighted that the background check process through the office of, through the background check unit with the Oregon Health Authority also can be confusing and lengthy. And at times that can be a barrier to certification and joining the workforce and getting the jobs that people are hoping to get as well. So those are some of those key takeaways from our training and certification questions and discussions. And then next, we also have some information on peer role fidelity. Excellent, thank you. One theme that came up across all the ways that we were connecting with people and getting feedback was the need for increased understanding of peer roles. And we saw that across multiple levels, whether it was systemically, organizationally, individually. People were saying, wow, we feel like the peer role isn't that well understood. And many people reported working with or for others who did not clearly understand the peer role and values. However, most people, when they were asked in our survey whether they felt that they had had their skills as a peer appropriately utilized so that they were doing the work that they were trained to do as a peer, and that was in line with peer values and scope of practice, most people said, yes, that actually is true for me. I feel that I do the work within the scope of practice. But for those who said, no, that wasn't true for me, they said they had done case management without training or pay increase, clinical tasks, chores, and errands, all outside of the peer scope. And next, we've got a couple quotes from our methods. The workforce is so new and people don't understand what it is. Another individual shared that we struggle to be taken seriously as a profession within peer-delivered services. Another person related to scope said for a long time, we were getting coffee or used as a taxi driver. And finally, another person who worked with us shared that peers don't know what not to do in their roles. So there is that confusion around peer roles, even amongst those of us who work within the peer field. So we thought those were some quotes that really highlighted some of those takeaways. Next, we also looked at hiring and employment. And a small number of peers, about 10%, shared that they had experienced difficulty finding work since starting to work in the peer field. Limited job opportunities was listed as a barrier related to that. And inadequate hours and wages were also listed as a challenge to peer positions. And some people also shared with us that needing a car could be a challenge to getting employed in a peer role, as well as organizations not truly understanding the peer role and what that could look like as another challenge. And we also checked in with employers of peer supports. And over half of those, about 55%, shared that they also experienced challenges in hiring and retaining qualified peer-delivered service workers. Next, we've got a graph here, so I'm going to really quickly break that down. So in our dark green, we've got what the employers, what those employing peer support workers reported. And in that kind of neon green, the lighter color, we've got what peer members of the workforce said. The interesting thing about this was we asked both peers and employers about a couple questions about supervision. And employers stated that supervision happened more frequently than those actually working in peer positions stated. So we thought that was kind of an interesting finding. And for those of us within the workforce, people had mixed feelings about the quality and about how frequently they were receiving supervision. And just over a third of folks who responded to our survey themselves have a supervisor with that lived peer experience. And about a quarter, about 25%, have a supervisor that brings that clinical experience. And most peers did rate their direct supervisor as understanding of the peer role, history, and scope of the peer delivered service worker type, which is very critical. And then Marianne's going to take us through these next quotes here.
Awesome. Thank you, Adrienne. So some of the quotes that we ran across were, we get to employ the so-called unemployable to give voice to those who don't know they have a voice. The value of peers is just beginning to be noticed. I believe there's not enough time for supervisors to be sure that each person can be supported properly. I wish there was mandatory consult support. We got a lot of good feedback and a lot of good, quotes from folks with lived experience. So-called unemployable, and then we end up in a profession that is really going somewhere. So yeah, next slide, please. So some of the takeaways about the pay and benefits: peers would like to receive higher pay and be more satisfied with their benefits. 68% are somewhat satisfied or not satisfied with their current pay. So for the peer workforce survey purposes, the average pay that was reported was $18.6026 an hour. And then when we were polling the employers reported hourly wages for peer delivered services positions range from $11.56 per hour to $31 per hour, with the median hourly rate at $17 an hour. And here's some more quotes. Salary is low for the work that we do. Jobs pay very little. It's hard to think about a professional organization when trying to pay bills, Maslow's hierarchy. Better pay would be nice. The agency is quick to edify our valued experience vocally, but is not on this pay scale that one can support oneself. So a lot of people are very concerned about, being able to do this for a living, but not being able to make a living. So that's some really significant barriers, especially for folks in frontier towns in rural Oregon. Delilah. So some of the key takeaways, also when asked about culturally specific and linguistically specific services, 56% of the survey participants said they were able to provide those support services. And the other participants who were unable or didn't know if they were able to provide those services, 53% said they had the ability to connect with someone within their organization who would provide those services. So, I think a lot of times with organizations, just like, hey, I know so-and-so speaks Spanish, or maybe we can connect with someone in a different program and maybe they can help us make this connection. But there's, several barriers and challenges that we face culturally and linguistically, is we lack of the access to high quality interpreters, language barriers, lack of diversity in the peer workforce, varying the needs of people served, lack of adequate training around culturally and linguistically specific services.
Thank you, Marianne. I think I'm coming in here at payment models and funding, a topic many people like to talk and think about, some more than others. So when we were looking at payment models and funding across the board, people shared that there was a critical need for more funding for and more contracting with peer-run programs and organizations across the state of Oregon. People talked about current payment models as frustrating because of red tape that can make it difficult to receive reimbursement for peer services. They described payment models and payment pathways as confusing and insufficient. They described them as limiting in terms of constraining how and where peer-delivered services can be provided in order to be able to receive reimbursement for that. And we asked participants which payment reimbursement models they saw as most beneficial for peer-delivered services. And most people, over half, actually said they were unfamiliar with payment reimbursement models because that was one of the options on that question. So more people selected that than any other option, followed by fee-for-service models. And then about 24%, almost a quarter, were interested in alternative payment models. And then we do have some key recommendations we'd like to quickly go over with all of you before we dialogue with everybody about what your reactions are to all of this information. So we developed, through all of the feedback received from this report, we developed some recommendations for consideration by the Oregon Health Authority across 6 primary categories: systems advocacy, diversity, equity and inclusion, supervision, training and certification, workforce sustainability, and funding. And the one word I'd use to describe all of those recommendations across the category is more. People want to see more peer services. They want to see more funding. They want to see more opportunities for advancement. They want to see more diversity within the peer workforce. They want to see more contracting with peer-run organizations. They want to see more supports. So we're going to briefly get into a couple of these highlighted key recommendations over our next couple of slides here. Marianne's going to start us off with supervision.
All right. So when it comes to having when it comes to having adequate peer supervision, so the models and the support organizations have in training internal supervisors or contracting with peer supervisors who are experienced in understanding the role and the scope of peer delivered services. If you were working under the clinical umbrella, I'm not, some of the being able to have access to a peer, someone with lived experience to do your supervisions is really super important. I know that it is for me, and I know that it is for our organization. So, and then having that supervision regular to where we can look forward to that. That's our time that we need with our supervisors to talk about all the things that, we're doing and help us to stay in that scope of practice and understand, what our job is and what our job is not.
All right, and key recommendations, training and certification. Related to this topic, we recommend to support individuals in accessing peer certification through the OHA, through the Oregon Health Authority, as well as providing technical assistance on navigating background check challenges, in addition to establishing guidelines and transparent communications on background checks requirements and exclusions. So peers going into this process are aware of what it looks like and have transparent information about that before they are at that stage of the background check process. And we'd also love to see clear and transparent timelines. How long does it take to get certified? How long does it take to process the applications or the background checks so that people can be informed as they make decisions about their own certification? The other recommendation in this area was to support increased access for continuing education for folks working in peer services across the state, including development of culturally and linguistically specific peer certification trainings, which is something we really saw a lack of, and continuing education opportunities in hopes that that would decrease barriers to certification and improve access and the ability to enter the workforce across the state. As we briefly talked about earlier, there are 28 counties in Oregon that do not currently have a state-approved peer certification training program. Only 8 of our 36 counties currently have access to that. So that is certainly an area where there could be improvement. And then our next area was systems advocacy. Recommendations here are to advocate for adequate. Gosh, I am tripping up on all the words that start with AD today. It's tough, especially because my name starts with AD. Advocate for adequate wages, benefits, and growth opportunities within the workforce, and making sure that there are career paths and advancement available to peers within this field within the state. We also encourage ongoing advocacy to increase understanding and awareness of the value of peer services and to decrease discrimination and stigma that occurs. And this would also help to make sure that folks across the state are aware of what peer support looks like, the value and benefits to that, and then hopefully positions and supports are going to be more in line with the authentic peer support as well. I believe we have one more recommendation. Awesome. In the category of diversity, equity, and inclusion, to provide funding opportunities to promote equity, inclusion, and diversity of the peer workforce through increased contracting with and funding opportunities for culturally and linguistically specific programs, to increase service availability and diversity of the peer workforce. In addition to that, we can also provide technical assistance to anyone who's interested. Maybe folks would like a little additional support to understand funding opportunities, to understand contracting processes. And so we thought technical assistance would be an important component of that recommendation as well. Finally, involve members of the peer-delivered services workforce and folks with lived experience in the planning, design, and implementation of policies and practices that impact the peer workforce. So Janie, when she started out the keynote today, very first keynote for Peer Apocalypse 2021, she talked about nothing about us without us and the origins of that phrase. So really making sure that that is respected in the planning, design, implementation, nothing about us without us when it comes to the peer workforce. So those are some of the key recommendations that we developed. There are more, there are a lot more. If anyone's interested, this report is available online. There is an executive summary that is a couple pages long if you're interested in just taking a look at those key recommendations and overview of the report and the process. And then there also is a very lengthy report if you're interested in really getting into the details and taking a look at all of the findings and takeaways, recommendations, all those many, many appendices. That is available as well. And we are going to get that report link into the chat as well. Awesome. Thanks so much. Kate has dropped that report link in the chat if anyone wants to check that out. And now we'd love to hear from all of you because we've shared a lot of information and covered it pretty quickly. So I'd next love to hear what reactions you all have to these findings, as well as what feelings came up for you as we were sharing all of this information, all these takeaways and recommendations. And we're going to do our best to try to make this into a word cloud. So if we are able to do that, then we will show that at the end. But I'd love if folks want to type in the chat. I'm more than happy to read those out as I see them come through. If you'd like to unmute and share something out loud, please feel free to do that as well. Whichever option works best for you. Oh yes, John.
So really quick, talking about supervision, and that's been a big discussion. I work for Deschutes County Behavioral Health, and one of the things that we've done, and I'm fortunate to be in an organization where we've got a large number of peers spread across the organization. And one of the things that we've started to do is having meetings with all the peers in the county, not necessarily supervision, but just to share what's going on and share issues. And then once a month, we do a supervision as a group. with one of the supervisors who isn't a peer, but pretty aware and advocates for us quite a bit. And in addition, I get supervision from my supervisor, who again, I'm fortunate to where I have a supervisor that, in addition to be a therapist, she's got lived experience and has real good understanding of what I do. I do see other peers being tasked some of the things you talked about, like doing clerical stuff. That's something and part of it's advocacy for myself. I won't do anything that doesn't benefit my clients. Right? I know what my role is. I know what I'm here to do, and I think a lot of times people just are thankful to have a job, and they just okay, I'll do that even though it's outside their scope. So I think self-advocacy can go a long ways, especially when dealing with big organizations.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, John. I think that's incredible that you have such a strong sense and confidence around what your role is as a peer and are able to self-advocate relating to doing that. I think that's also really cool to hear that in Deschutes County, you've got these meetings that are happening, bringing all the peers together as connection opportunities, it sounds like, in addition to the supervision that people are receiving.
Go ahead, John. I'm sorry.
Oh, in addition, it's funny because I'm talking about the organization. They actually identified the need for training because I know there's no training on the east side of the mountains for peers. I had to travel to Salem when I did my peer training, and so as an organization, we were actually approached saying, "Hey, we want to look at developing this. We need peers to be on this, committee to look at it." So the county's actually recruiting peers within the county to help develop training, which I think again has been really great. So.
Yeah, fantastic to hear that peers are involved within that process. Thank you, John. And then, gosh, somebody had just started to say something.
It was me, Patrick. My name is Patrick. I'm here in Multnomah County. And what I've came across in the scene is I know a lot of people that do want to help and become peer support specialists and certified recovery mentors, but their background excludes them a lot. And so now you get a lot of people that want to help. Now that they can't because of their background, they're off doing something else. And I feel like we're losing a great valuable resource right there. And it's just, then I've had to look into it as something that's been going on like since 2009 of what they have done here in Oregon. And it's like, okay, when do we sit down and take a look at it? When do we sit down and take a look and see what are we doing to really help out these people that have this life experience, that want to give back to the community, that want to help, and now we exclude them? Where are they going to go next? So that's my biggest takeaway from it. And I still have a hard time encouraging them to still keep going out and volunteering, still keep going out and doing that I know you have to go to work today to pay your bills.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Patrick, for sharing that. I mean, I think you really said so wonderfully what we heard from a lot of peers across the state as well. That is, the background check process needs to be looked at. We really need to figure out how that can be made more inclusive and not be excluding individuals who bring incredible lived experience. That would probably be so amazing at this job. But
I think the other part of that, Adrienne, is that we know when we look at BIPOC communities, their backgrounds, charges they may have gotten in the past are more severe than, say, from the white people ended up getting charges. And we know this, research has been done, it's been looked at that. And so that makes it even harder. And so that process that they do at the background there needs to be a way to allow for that, to compensate for that, knowing that we have a whole community of people who have those backgrounds. And I don't know how else to explain it. I don't have great vocabulary but around that. But we do know that that is an issue when those background checks are run, which leads to lack of diversity in the workforce. So it's having to kind of look at those issues together, not just getting people through background checks, but making sure they're weighed properly so that we can create a more diverse workforce at the same time, knowing that these charges that people received in the past were not, and I hate to use this word, but were not equitable across the board. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I don't have a better way of saying that.
In the chat, Allie, Michael Libachek used 2 words that I think describe it quite well, which is systemic racism. This is due
Yes.
to systemic racism.
Exactly.
Mhm. Adrienne, we have a couple other people with their hands raised as well.
Thank you so much, Marianne. Sometimes I get so excited,
It's
I
okay.
forget to check for the hands. I appreciate you bringing that. Roberto, I see your hand up.
Yes, I was trying to get the mute button, sorry. So I work with the Northwest Instituto Latino. We provide peer support and mentorship for Latinos in recovery. So I have a question, okay? And I'm fresh to this, you know, this career, okay? What, if I was to look it up in the dictionary, what would be the definition of the peer role is my question. Do you understand what I mean? Because I believe, you know, of course there are ethics and there's ways of doing things, you know, I understand that. I need to understand that for myself because I've worked for an agency that provides resources to the community before, you know, did street outreach, did all that, okay? And I just don't understand how, like, and you probably get this when it comes to whether peers and mentors get paid enough. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because it's like, we do deal with a lot of drama and a lot of, you know, inappropriateness and all that. You understand what I mean? Sometimes our lives are put in danger. You know, right now I want to say I work for an organization where that is less happening, you know, but before I was working with an organization where, man, check this out, I had to be on my P's and Q's 24/7 period. Now, what is the role is what I'm saying. You know what I mean? Are there ethics to that role also, of course, you know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, I think that is such an excellent question. And your question really captures one of the main findings from all of this work that we're doing was people saying, folks don't really understand what the peer role is. And that includes people who are doing this work themselves, as well as the organizations that are employing them, the supervisors that are supervising, the systems that are coming up with funding and contract opportunities for us. So I think that is definitely one of the big challenges, because I don't think there is a dictionary definition. Because there are different ideas of what peer support looks like.
And what I mean by role is because I keep it real. When I have sponsees and I keep it real with them, I just stop kicking it with that guy. You know, stop going out in the bad neighborhoods where you're gonna get triggered. But a lot of people say, no, you can't really talk to him that way. You got to talk to him like this. And I'm like, no, come on now. When do we? I know that there's going to be times where we got to be sympathetic and empathetic, right? I understand that. But when does that line get drawn, and does that affect the role of the peer? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, okay, this person's not understanding it. Let me try and get on his level and say, okay, check this out. Stop using that shit. You're young. You know what I mean? Sorry to say it that way, but does that affect the definition of the peer role? Is my question.
I think part of the peer role is having boundaries. And I really see boundaries as choosing what gets through. Like there's still a flow. Boundaries aren't like a fence or a wall. There's something where we choose what comes through and we choose what we put out there as well. So boundaries certainly are an important part of peer roles. And so for folks who were certified through the Mental Health and Addiction Certification Board of Oregon, MHAAO, there is a code of ethics related to that. The Oregon Health Authority also has a code of conduct related to all folks who are certified as traditional health workers. There's some national organizations who have standards, values, ethics, things like that available as well. You know, I know MHAAO has also done some excellent work in terms of compiling some of those pieces for addiction peers as well. But that definitely, and I see some comments coming through in the chat as well. One from John Roberto, I think you were spot on. Well, we do have to have boundaries in this job. We live in the gray, like that in between area. Yes. And I'm looking at time and I realize we got about a couple more minutes. So we've got two more hands up, Melissa and Delilah. I see your hand. So I want to make sure that we have time to get to both of you. And then we have got a really quick break and a fun video coming up after that. But I'm really appreciating and loving all the discussion and all the incredible thoughts and observations happening so far. All right, Melissa, I believe your hand has been up for a minute. I appreciate your patience.
Got it. I just wanted to say really quickly that I am happy that there is awareness being brought to the fact that there, I didn't realize it was only 8 counties that had the certification programs. I myself am in one that's not. I live in the MHAAO County, which is very rural. So if it hadn't been for the fact that I got a job with Mental Health and Addiction Association of Oregon and, was already going over there and they assisted with paying for me to do that, like putting me through it, I wouldn't be where I am right now. I wouldn't have gotten to as much as I wanted to. And there's a lot of people in these rural areas that they don't have cars, they don't have computers, but they could do amazing things if, given the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I think that's an important observation. So many people have so many incredible things to offer, but may not meet strict requirements like needing to have a job. Sorry, not needing to have a job. If you're looking for a job, you don't need to have a job. Needing to have a car, other things that may be a barrier to being able to even join the workforce in the first place. And the last hand that I see up is Delilah. Delilah, if you were speaking, I want to let you know that you are on mute.
I'm old, and so it takes me a while to find it. Thank you for having me. So this is more from, I'm a person that has both a lot of addiction history and a significant amount of recovery time, as well as mental health experiences. Excuse me while I pull up what I was going to say. And so where I work, we've kind of started, and I recognize that the conversation is a lot about, the details, specific kind of details on how to work with someone. And this just kind of fits for me. Mm-hmm. And this is something I'm working on at my workplace, or we have worked on at our workplace. Mm-hmm. Nothing about us without us, of course. Mm-hmm. The vision is where every person defines and directs their journey. The mission, we are moving toward a community of hope, grounded in compassionate advocacy through mutual peer relationships. Mm-hmm. The slogan is creating foundations of hope together. Transparency, self-determination, autonomy, and collaboration are foundational to a peer-supported relationship and connection.
Wow, thank you for sharing that, Delilah. Really cool. So that's something you're working on along with your colleagues to describe the peer role?
Yeah, but yes, exactly. To give people of either side, if you will, an idea of what we want to do, what we plan to do, and how we plan to, or us and the persons that are living there under the hospital are going about our business. It's a foundation for people to kind of give a quick information about how we do what we're doing and where the base is coming from. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, yes. And I think that's a great quote. I appreciate you sharing it, Delilah. Thank you. And thank you so much to everyone who just shared your thoughts. We are going to share our email addresses at the end. So if you want to talk more about this, or you're like, hey, Adrienne, I had this thing I wanted to say and there wasn't time to say it, I invite you, please reach out to me. I would love to talk more. We can talk on the phone. We can talk via email, whatever works for you. And next, before our break, we have a fun little video featuring Zoom, where we are right now.
Yeah, so everyone, just bear with me 1 second while I make sure I can get this to work.
Thanks so much, Kate.
And also the video is optional. I think we'll come back together. We're going to take a little break. We'll come back together right at 2. And so if you want to dip out now, feel free. The video is unrelated to material, but we do hope you enjoy it. Share sound. Okay. And Adrienne, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear this?
But hear me, but we'll try and at least discuss.
Guys, what happened? She left the meeting. Yeah, she left the meeting. It kicked her out the internet. Yeah. Can you guys see me? All of you guys. I see that there's a little record sign at the top of the screen. So the teacher's recording this. She can watch us and not behaving. Yeah, I know. And the principal. Yeah, we know. That should be serious trouble. I know, but I'm just like muting my mic because I don't want to talk. So we should behave. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. My mom told me that. I mean, gummies. Because if the principal finds out that video of if we were being bad right now, she would see us being very bad, and we would get in big trouble with our parents. Well, we'll be toast. We'll be toast. We're just talking. Toast means we're in trouble. Not toast. That she doesn't have our notepad, our phone. And whoever said we'll be toast, whoever said that, I'll maybe have toast for breakfast tomorrow. Yeah, I said that. That sounds really bad. They don't. That sounds funny. They don't know our number. I said that. With toast and eggs, that sounds really good with lettuce. Not eggs.
Good grammar and spelling are important.
Okay. Hope you all enjoyed that. Yeah, so we can take a few more minutes break. Erin needs to run to the restroom or anything like that, and we'll get started promptly back at 2. So I'll see you all back in a few. Okay, great. Welcome back, everyone. I'll go ahead and get us started. And so we're going to follow this same format for this second half of the presentation. We're going to present a little bit of data, and then we'd love to hear what you all think. Erin and I from Comagine are going to be presenting on a series of interviews that were conducted as a part of this needs assessment. So this needs assessment was great in that it used mixed methods. So basically there's this big survey that went out, and then we also did interviews. And so a lot of these interviews confirmed things that we found in the survey. They explained things. So a lot of these themes, Adrienne and Marianne just spoke to pretty well. And so these are just meant to give some richness to those survey results. So we conducted phone interviews basically last summer with people delivering peer services in Oregon, 20 peers in direct service roles, 8 peers in leadership roles. I put the link in the chat to the full report out. It's about 10 pages, and there's a lot more quotes and findings there if you're interested. So what was the goal of these interviews? So our aims were to describe the successes and challenges in the peer-delivered services workforce, to identify training and workforce gaps for services, to identify linkage to care successes and challenges to scale up existing services, to identify sustainability strategies for services and reimbursement, and finally, to understand the impacts of COVID-19 on the peer-delivered service workforce. So what did we find? A couple of main themes. So first of all, peers reported that adequate wages, benefits, and growth opportunities are really needed to grow the workforce. A couple of quotes from that. When you're only being paid minimum wage or a little bit above that, that's not living wage. As peers, we need to not be suffering or worried about our next paycheck. Whether that's going to be enough for our rent and our food and everything else, and how's that going to take care of our children? Someone else said the career ladder sucks. If you want to be a peer support, the wages don't pay you high enough. And if you want to get a better wage, you have to lose the fidelity of a peer and go to a CDAC or become a clinician. So this really confirms a lot of what Adrienne and Marianne already mentioned. Not a lot of opportunities for moving forward and generally just a much lower pay than is required. Next, we found that peers told us about burnout, vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue are widespread, and there's not enough support for that. And I think this quote was really illustrative in speaking to that. Someone told us that we have a lot of empathy and we count. There's a lot of that trauma, but we carry a lot of other people's trauma with us when we're working with them. That's just who we are as people. We don't have a lot of aftercare in terms of working with clients or saying, hey, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling emotionally strangulated. There's a fear of saying anything about that because if you do, then it's like, well, are you really fit enough to be a peer support if you're struggling? And we saw this come up a lot. People felt like there just wasn't support for them. And then this relates to another theme that we identified in the data around peer roles and what we've been talking about what that really is, what that looks like. And a lot of peers expressed in this interview this feeling of needing to prove their worth on a team. And I think that this quote speaks to that as well. So the final big takeaway was peers highlighted that people should recognize the importance of the work, the roles, and the value. And this also relates to the discussion that we were just having. And so someone told us, I feel like there needs to be a bigger training, like a mass training on what a peer support is, all the different types of peer support roles. I think it's important for people because people still go, what's a peer support? What's your job? What is that? What does that mean? And similarly to what we were discussing before, someone said, I think sometimes people can treat us like we're cab drivers or we're just like messengers, or we can do the little menial things. I think a big thing is we tend to say yes more than we say no. We tend to have poorer boundaries than we should because we're terrified that we're going to lose our position because we may perceive it to be a lower role. It's hard. It's a hard job because you're constantly feeling like you have to validate yourself with the team. So those are those 3 takeaways. Yeah, and thanks for the comments, Ali and Sabrina. So yeah, the people were frustrated with wages, burnout and trauma were common, and the importance of peer work. And really this also speaks to a lot of what we found in the survey and confirmed all of that and solidified the recommendations that we were able to make from this report. So moving on a little bit, and I'll present a couple more slides, then we'll have room for discussion again. We also asked people about COVID-19. We did this last summer, so that was when we were all pretty green in COVID and quarantine times. And people reported a lot of negative impacts and some positive impacts. So in terms of negative impacts, things I'm sure all of you encountered and see in your work, interactions felt less personal, feelings of isolation, remote work limited or eliminated in-person interactions, increased levels of stress for peers and the people they serve, increased workload, project delays, service hours were cut at different orgs, and changing priorities. And finally, technological barriers. And this was for peers and for the people that they served. And several participants noted that people receiving services often don't have access to phones or internet or don't feel comfortable using technology, especially people who were currently unhoused. And COVID just created a ton of barriers to provide care in the way that a lot of peers felt like their work works really well for people. And so much of that was just hampered. Someone told us everything's virtual now. My work meetings are on Zoom or on the phone. It's the heart of peer delivered services. It's face-to-face and connecting. It's meeting people where they are. And then secondly, someone said it's almost like they're ignoring the opioid issue to focus on COVID-19. Opiate issues are just probably going to be worse right now because people are at home, they're sad, and it's anxiety-ridden times. And we had a lot of quotes that were similar to this about the difficulties of connection and how it just made everything so much harder for everyone. Everyone was just to some degree we're still pretty isolated in a lot of ways, how much harder everything was and how harder it was to connect. People did report some positive impacts of COVID-19, expanding service areas, expanding services, so increasing telehealth options, and increased opportunities for connections with new people in need of services, for example, people with disabilities or people who were homebound. So people said COVID has changed the way we think of outpatient care, and it's actually been a blessing to widen our horizon, so to speak. And then someone said, well, we've gotten creative. I've done a drive up and drop, knock and drop. We've done a lot of that to meet their needs. We've gone and got them food boxes, taken it and set it on their porch. I think if anything, especially this second quote is more of a testament to resiliency of the workforce more than positive benefits of COVID, because people have been really creative and have really adapted to provide the care that they're trained to do and want to provide. But some people did report that there's now new telehealth options for care that weren't there before. So based on all of this, this report, through all this data collection, we also made a number of recommendations. So first of all, to develop ways to address compassion, fatigue, vicarious trauma, and burnout. And this can be done through requiring organizations to have supervisory models or adequate supervision, and encouraging peer support for peer support workers. Another recommendation was advocating for adequate wages, benefits, and growth opportunities. The idea here is that wages and benefits should align with the skill and the emotional demands of the job, which are both high. And people feel like right now they really don't. Next, encourage ongoing advocacy to increase awareness and understanding of the value of peer services. So this was really about sharing information, especially within medical systems that follow very biomedical models where credibility is given to certain people, and highlight the unique role of peers and the importance of peers and help people to understand what peers can bring to the team. Next was supporting training standards. So this had to do with revamping the stringent criminal background checks and getting certified, getting certified and recertified easier, which a lot of people thought was difficult, and communication was poor around that piece. And finally, improving reimbursement rates for peer services to create sustainable funding. It's really about, it's kind of like what Adrienne said about more on everything. It was about people reported the role needing to be supported. Funding is patchy and getting funding is resource intensive. And even whenever it does happen, it's rarely enough. And so those were the big recommendations that came out of this. So next, we would love to hear from you. And we have a couple of questions that we would like to ask to start the dialogue, similar to last. But before we do, does anyone have any questions about any of that? Okay, I'm not, oh, Allie, I see a hand. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm also eating as I raise my hand, which was not the smartest thing to do. So the connection I see here between different things or different parts of this research, I guess, is that training of workforce is important. But I don't think in the almost 25 years that I've been doing this type of work, there's never been enough training for the systems, for the providers, for the state, for now the CCOs, to understand what peer delivered services is. The focus has always been so much on training up the workforce, which again is important, but the workforce isn't able to do their job if the people we're supposed to be communicating with and partnering with in some instances and all of that, collaborating with maybe, I don't know, but we have to have a relationship is the point. If they don't understand what we're doing or what peer support is or how to pay for it or how to support it, that creates a problem in the whole peer delivered system, including those career pathways that we would all like to develop. So anyway, I just kind of wanted to make that connection between training and maybe diverting focus in the future on systems and providers that aren't peer providers.
Sure. Yeah, thanks so much for that, Allie. That's a great point. And so I think we'll just go ahead and blend questions with the sort of feedback. And so for this next bit, we're just going to talk about, so I'm happy to, I see the two hands. And then the question again is just what reaction do you have to these findings and what feelings came up for you? And I'm going to get back to word cloud duty. So I will let my colleague Erin take it from here.
Yeah, and I just wanted to comment, Allie, thank you for sharing that, because I think the onus is often put on peers that they have to advocate for the people they're serving. They advocate for themselves within their organization, within the state. So it definitely seems like more education needs to be happening outside the workforce, more in the organization and at the state level. So I wanted to share that a lot of how we're disseminating a lot of this information is to OHA across different departments. And then we're also disseminating it to different organization levels, trying to educate people and get the word out about the services being provided. So I just wanted to share that. And Adrienne, I wonder if you want to share a little bit about the work that you all are doing around disseminating some of the results as well.
Sure, absolutely. So most recently, Marianne and I presented to the Metro Plus Addiction Association. Gosh, I always mess up the acronym orders. I'm terrible with acronyms. MAPS, the Metro Plus Association of Addiction Peer Professionals. I think I got it there. About the needs assessment and about the findings and dialogue with folks there. In the future, we are planning and hoping to present to the Traditional Health Worker Commission of the Oregon Health Authority as well. And we also ask to everyone, if you share the report, if you share the executive summary or the full report, please do that as well, because every person that shares it and helps get this information out to new places and new areas that we may not even be aware of yet, I think that really helps when it comes to spreading this information and really honoring all of the work and all of the feedback that was given by so many peers across the state over the year while this work was ongoing.
Awesome. Thanks, Adrienne.
Thank you.
So I'm going to move over to where I see some hands raised. Anthony, do you want to go first?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Am I coming through all right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So my name is Anthony Wilson. I'm a part of the project out of Coos Bay. So I just have a question. I wanted to just kind of curious how organizations are handling the phone situation. I hope you can hear me because it's saying my connection's unstable. Are you guys using your personal phones for work? Are you provided phone? I was too with COVID. That's kind of a issue for me, and I'm just curious about. And then personal vehicles also. Like, where's the line to be drawn for that? I come from a time when, you know, if I needed a phone from my employer, he provided one, and they got apps that they download on our own personal phones, and I just don't agree with that. So I'm just kind of curious what is going on out there with guys concerning that. Did you get that?
Yeah, and I think I can repeat. I wonder if folks want to share in the chat what's happening at people's organizations with using your own personal phone, if you're required to have your own personal car, or if any way that's supported through your organization. If folks want to share in the chat what that looks like for you. That's a really great question, Anthony. Thank you. While folks are doing that, I'll move over to Kim. You want to share your question or comment with the group?
Yeah, hi, thank you. So I was thinking just before when everybody was talking about educating providers and other people within the healthcare systems about the peer role. And I was wondering kind of what everybody's thoughts were. So now that the CCOs, you know, the coordinating care organizations are getting pressure to integrate THWs, it seems to me like there's a lot of, I'm working for a CCO right now. Seems like there's a lot of confusion over the THW, what it is, you know, and so then it's like we're peers and we're trying to explain that, but then there's like this other term, and it almost feels like the THW, I don't know how to say this. There's not a very wide diversity of THW types I'm finding within our CCO. And I'm just, I never really, I mean, I kind of understand why the umbrella term exists, but I'm just experiencing it as now I have to help educate on what a traditional health worker is. And I also have to educate on what a peer support specialist is and how that might differ from another type of traditional health worker. So it's like, I don't know if anybody else has any experience with something like that, but that's what I'm finding we're up against. And we have almost 8 now traditional health workers providing care coordination. So anyway, that's been my experience recently.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Kim. I think that does contribute to the role clarity around the language that we use around peers. I see that in a lot of different ways and it can be confusing. I'm wondering if folks, any reactions to that, to what Kim shared about the different names that people are calling things and the different roles in the space, especially related to CCOs.
This is Adrienne. I'm happy to comment if others don't have things to say, but I do see a couple other hands up, so I want to make sure that those folks have time to respond, but I'll be on the list if there's no comments on that, Erin.
Okay, sounds good. We'll jump to the next.
Or Laura. Erin, there's.
Oh, I see there. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Hubert
Laura,
or Laura.
Laura, if you want to share.
Sure. Thank you. This is me with my hair all the way up. With COVID. Hi, Adrienne. It's really good to hear you all. Some of the Oregon people, hi, Marianne, come up to Washington on Zoom and actually give our peer specialists or certified peer counseling input and advice and support as they go through their world. I'm actually not one. I never desired to be one. I've done direct service work like street outreach and other kinds of, hand-to-hand support, but just never went through that that categorization. But I did put in the chat box, and it may already be like drifted so far up that I just thought I would just say it. And that sometimes I find it a little bit troubling how we do focus a lot on our workforce category. And I hear that, and you know, this is a burgeoning field. I mean, there were times when there was no one doing the work that you're doing. And actually, one of your keynote speakers, Celia Brown, is one of the first in the United States to be to have this role. So it wasn't really that long ago. And then, you know, before we knew it, everyone was taking training and getting jobs. And but my concern, this is more of a personal comment, is that we not forget how our movement began, which was really creating alternatives to the system. Not necessarily, now I believe that infiltration is what we could argue has happened now, with peers getting placed inside the system and kind of infiltrating it. But I would have to say that if research was done on that, I really honestly don't know if we've had a big impact on changing the structure. Like if our job was to demolish basically the structural racism, let's imagine that was our job. I don't know if we would have done that. If we would have eliminated anything structural, I don't know. I just have to say that, and I've lived in 5 states. I've been very active in the peer movement for a long time, and other states where there are all kinds of other peer workers and stuff. So I've seen this happen, and I get concerned. And it doesn't mean that, you know, no one should be doing what they're doing, you know, because people really do like these jobs. And I could see why. There's nothing better than helping people. But we have to accept the fact that originally it was to really change the system. And that's where the term alternatives came from. And so I get worried about telehealth. I get worried about, you know, there's so much to worry about now. But I do have hope, because I do know that there are people with incredible hearts that are doing the hand-to-hand work. So don't get me wrong with my comment, but please remember that our job was sort of bigger than ourselves, and it's bigger than the job title. So I just think that that's something important. I just wanted to echo that from, you know, 40 years ago, maybe, or something. So Allie knows too, because we know each other from a long time ago. So anyhow, go forth and do good work.
Yeah, Laura, thank you so much for bringing that up. I think that's such an important perspective, and something that we were hearing in the interviews, especially when we asked around reimbursement, was a resistance to wanting to be part under that system of reimbursement in the medical model. And I think it speaks to what you're sharing about what that looks like when now everything is fully integrated into a system that wasn't what peers necessarily historically how it was created. So thank you so much for bringing that up. And I see a couple people in the chat are also agreeing with you. So thank you so much for sharing that. I see one more hand raised, so I want to get to it before we have to stop the discussion here. So Hubert, do you want to share out or ask a question?
Yeah, I wanted to just share about my experience being a peer support specialist. You know, I started my career in this field as a peer support specialist, right? I didn't know anything about peer support. Matter of fact, I work for a large nonprofit organization. And when I started as a peer, I was in one of the programs that had clinicians who, you know, CADCs and QMHSHWs and all those things. And I was the peer on this team, and it was like brand new. So when I got hired as a peer in this clinical situation, I didn't know how I fit in, but I had a good team. So my role as a peer support specialist on that team was to assist the clinicians with their clients, you know, like helping them go to recovery meetings, helping them get food boxes, helping them look for apartments, helping them developing relationships from an experience-based, from my lived experience. Because I'm a recovering addict, and the clients that I was servicing were like me, and when they seen me, they felt more comfortable because they knew that I come from where they came from. Because a lot of my clients were people that I got high with, that I went to jail with, that I got clean with. Some of them were even my relatives, right? And so it was interesting because I had to kind of like be the forebearer in my organization of what a peer role is supposed to be. So basically what I understood about and learned as being a peer is about developing relationships with the peer. So they don't feel like, I don't have a degree. I'm not this with all these letters. I'm just like you, trying to help you get to where you need to get to recover. So, as I went along, I got more experience. I became a peer too. They developed things for me to do. And as I've been around it for some years now, I'm seeing that the peer support specialists is evolving within the systems of how they can be supported, how they can be of support to agencies. Now, here's what I know for a fact that peers' roles should be, is to be able to get out and do outreach with their organization to be able to build trust with the organization and the people that they need to do, whether it be counselors or mental health providers, whatever. But peers can be used to go out into the field and do outreach to develop relationships, to bring them. Because what I'm seeing, I'm a drug and alcohol counselor now. I'm always going to be a peer, but I've gotten experience and I've grown. So what I see is that what would be very effective for peers, because everybody don't know, well, how should we use peers? What should peers do? I think every organization needs peers, and they need to pay the peers, and the peers need to be the ones that go out into the field and go into these camps and go to where you see all the homeless people and the people that's mentally ill and the people that's on drugs, and go get them and bring them to their whoever they work for so that they can get the services. Because see, clinicians don't have the time to go out and do outreach because they have other things to do. Peers can go out and do the outreach and bring the clients to the clinicians that need to do the work. See, and I think that should be the role of peers, because peers need, basically, it's about developing relationships and trust to the people in the who needs the help. And I've been saying that's what I see that could really, because I do outreach work now, even as I still do the stuff that I learned to do as a peer and still do clinician work. So I know what peers will be. Peers are very valuable right now because people cannot get to the services that are needed. Measure 110, they got this money out here that all these organizations need to be peer driven to be able to get to the people that need services. I think that would be ideal for what peers should be able to do.
Yes. Thank you so much for saying that. That was beautifully said. And I feel like a great way to end this session on that. So thank you so much, Hubert. Thank you for sharing that and sharing your story. And thank you to everyone for attending and for sharing and providing your questions and your comments. They're so valuable and we just really appreciate it. So to wrap up, Adrienne, I'm going to pass it to you. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you, Erin. Just to echo what Erin just said, thank you all so much for your thoughts, for your feedback, for your questions, for your excellent comments. We really appreciate the time that we've spent together over the past 90 minutes. It feels like it's been 10 minutes to me, hard to believe that it's already 2:30 over here in Oregon, but it is. So thank you all so much for coming together with us for this time and for learning a bit more about the peer delivered services needs assessment report that happened and all the different takeaways and recommendations. We did put in the chat the links to access those. If you're interested in the full deal, if you're interested in all of the information that is available through that, please do check that out. Today, we just provided brief slivers. There is a lot more information, a lot more detailed recommendations available. And we also have a couple of word clouds based on the discussions we just had that Kate is going to share for us real briefly here as we get ready to wrap. And is this from the first discussion, Kate, or covering the two dialogues?
This is the first discussion. So yeah, people brought up diversity, boundaries, background checks, racism, role, and then all types of little things were mentioned once or twice. And then in the second, I can make this a little bigger. A little more discussion about systems, changing the systems, educating providers, providing alternatives, outreach, work cell, and relationships.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kate, for making those live while the discussions were happening. Really appreciate that. Cool visual way just to see, you know, where a lot of the comments, where a lot of the questions, where a lot of the feedback was coming from for both of those dialogues. So again, thank you all so much for being here with us today. We're almost wrapped up with day one of Peer Apocalypse. There are some evening events happening if anyone is interested. And then I hope to see you all either later today or tomorrow, the next day or the next day, because we got 3 more fantastic days of Peer Apocalypse. Thank you all again. Have an excellent rest of your day. Thanks for being here.
Everyone, thanks for coming.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.